Hello, Spark fans, and welcome to day 2 of Keynote Roundup announcement-y things from the Data and AI Summit, US edition 2021. So there's been loads and loads of stuff going on. I did a video yesterday about all the crazy data engineering announcements, and then on the start of Keynote 2, we've got all the things to do with data science, ML, all the interesting things they're doing in that space. Now, I am not the best person to be talking data science. I'm a data engineer. I work on pipelines of data and stuff. So I've invited a guest back on the show to talk about what's been happening in the data science space and help us make sense of all these new things. So we'll be talking about the new weird persona view, Featurestore, AutoML, all of those crazy, exciting things. As always, if you're new around here, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know what you think down in the comments, and we'll go from there. So, welcome back to the show, Terry.
Ta-da! Hello, everybody. Nice to be here again. Thank you very much for having me, Simon.
It's lovely to have you. So what do you think? How's it going? How have you been finding the summit? Exciting stuff?
Yeah, I think the summit has been really great. I think it's been particularly good from kind of just the general sessions. I think the caliber of sessions this year has been particularly higher than it normally is, and there's been a whole load of really great sessions. I've got loads out of all the engineering sessions, but this time round I've particularly found that there's been some really great sessions around managing models in production and a lot about the production lifecycle. So just a whole load of really great things. I think the keynotes have also been phenomenal this year, and there's just been some really insightful discussions. So 2 thumbs up.
Yes. I mean, I've been making a nuisance of myself in all of the AMAs asking awkward engineering questions, because that's just how we roll. It's very fun.
Yeah, I mean, those AMAs are a real highlight of this event. I think getting that opportunity to bombard the product teams and bombard the people who own these particular tools with questions and try and get some feedback about what's happening and the direction that it's going. I think those are the sessions as well that I've got the most value out of.
Okay, awesome. And the most exciting things, let's talk about some of the new things that we've started to see.
Absolutely.
So, first things first, if you logged into Databricks yesterday, and again, really weirdly, if you're not in the US and certainly in the UK, we logged in first thing in the morning. The keynote wasn't until the afternoon, and we were like, what is this? Because they'd released the new persona switcher. So you've now got a role-based menu inside Databricks. So we've got this nice normal thing that we know and love, the normal data science and engineering workspace, as it's delightfully called. And we've got a little switch, and so we can choose different things. Now, the bottom one, kind of familiar. We've been doing SQL Analytics demos. We've been having a look at that thing. That's SQL Analytics that we know and love, which is now known as Databricks SQL, but fine. What's this thing? Machine learning? What do you make of Databricks Machine Learning, Terry?
Yeah, so this was a, we weren't expecting this to come. I thought the official wording was that this would be something that we would enable, but no, just pop, right? And there it was. And so what you've got kind of here and what we're looking at is this new interface, which is trying to focus people more around, as Sai says, right, the persona that they most belong to. And if you're working in that machine learning space, well, now, we're separating away. There's getting kind of one too many windows in the main engineering workspace. So we're separating that away now and keeping it focused. So the new things that we can kind of see in here are aligned with some of the new announcements that they've made. So in here, you've got MLflow, right? We've seen MLflow a lot of times. We've got videos on MLflow if you want to take a look at that stuff. But now we've got these 2 additional new features here, right? Of what you can see here, of looking at, right, well, how do I get started with things like AutoML? And then also right down the bottom, you've also got feature stores, okay, which we'll come on to talk about both of those.
Hidden on the way, I've got my little thing. There we go.
Awesome, right?
New things.
Yeah, and a better view at experimentation tracking too, because the thing with experimentation tracking before, you'd kind of have to go in and see what's happening and then go into a particular experiment. So a lot of that's been bubbled up, which is really useful as well. One less click to make, certainly.
Nice. I think one of the first questions I had about this is going, oh, so I only get one of those views. It's like, that's now where I go. And I don't really think that's the intention at all. It's just the menu is getting so big. It's now just going, I'm in this mode. Here's all the tools. Essentially, it's just collecting all the same tools, but just in a more easily accessible way, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, we spend the bulk of our time we'll spend it flitting between both, and even more so when Databricks SQL is enabled, flicking between these multiple menus. And I think it is just that, right? It's just trying to focus you a bit more. It's getting a bit busy in there. And I think don't forget you can turn a lot of these features on and off if you don't want them. So things like, now with repos in there too, the bars is kind of getting bigger and bigger. So I think it makes sense to split it out like this. But I'd imagine, we'll see these bits chop and change over time.
Yeah, makes sense. Or they stop adding things, which, hopefully is not the way.
Yep, exactly. Hopefully not.
Okay, so number 2, we've got AutoML.
Yeah.
So we've heard about AutoML from various different things. You've got AutoML in machine learning, you've got AutoML in Power BI and all that kind of stuff. What is this? Why is it different? Why do we need a Databricks AutoML?
Yeah, so I guess let's think about what AutoML inside something like Azure Machine Learning does today, right? So AutoML inside Azure Machine Learning is designed to hit your kind of citizen data scientist. It's somebody who might not have, a great deal of experience of building machine learning models. They might not know some of the intricacies of what has to go into feature engineering, but what they do have is a great idea and a data set, right? So you can go to a ZeroML and you can say, this is my data set. And it's like, okay, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to do classification? Are you trying to do regression? Is this a time series problem? Do you want to use deep learning or not? And you just tweak these couple of things and say, this is what I'm trying to predict. And then you basically go and make a coffee or several coffees, and it will iterate over producing a number of different models and trying a whole load of different approaches. And what it does through there is try all these different approaches and try different feature engineering techniques. And then at the end, it will give you a model that you could do something with. You could try and pop that live. You could download it. You could build out your own scoring notebook and actually get that working. But there's quite a few kind of steps to get there. So Databricks are taking it from a slightly different approach. So you've still got a little bit of the kind of GUI base. I like to do this and click through and say, yes, I'm doing a regression problem or I'm doing a classification problem. They're the only 2 use cases currently supported. It says forecasting, which we assume just means time series, right, is coming at some point soon. But at the moment, it's not quite there. So we've got we've got regression and we've got classification in there. And you can just kind of click through. But the difference that we have here is that rather than spinning up a load of models in the background and then you just download them, what Databricks are doing is they're going to spin everything up. But then once you're done, rather than having to say, this is my model, it gives you the full notebook. So instead of kind of having this kind of black box, what went into producing that, what you've got is a full notebook. So when we think about how we take people from being citizen data scientists and move them up so they can start getting more experienced with Python-based machine learning models, they've got this as a great approach to say, well, I know I want to do classification. I know this is my data. I'll spin it up and I'll get a starter for 10, and then I can start building on top of it. And that is incredibly powerful. That's a real killer feature.
Nice. So to kind of paraphrase and make sure I've understood from an engineering point of view. So whereas a lot of the existing ones, they're going to make a model for you. And then if you want to try and tweak that and tailor it and use that to do some more detailed lower things, you kind of have to start from scratch, but using that as a guide, as a starter, as a bit of get your start down the path. Whereas now we're talking about you can just open up the thing that they made for you and actually use that as a real good foundation to start tweaking and tailoring.
Yeah, and it kind of, because you've got a whole spectrum of AutoML. You've got the ZeroML down one end at the super easy side, and then you've got things like AutoML in Databricks isn't that new. We've had HyperOpt and we've had other frameworks like Teapot that you could use, but they required a significant amount of Python experience to get started with. So we're kind of sitting in this middle ground. And the other benefit that we have as well is it's really tightly integrated with MLflow. So when this is all running, and we've got 100 experiments running, again, in parallel, right? Because this is going to run on your distributed compute. So if you've got 10 machines running, you can have 10 of these models training in parallel. Once we have all of that writing out into MLflow, well, we can see, what is good and what isn't quite good about our models and pick the one which is best. So good stuff. What I would say is that, it's a new feature, right? It is going to be slightly behind initially some of the other more hardened products like Azure Machine Learning. So one of the things, a real frequent use case is ensemble models. And one of the things that Azure ML does very well is it will try a lot of different approaches. And then what it will also try is model stacking and ensembles. So saying, if I try these couple of different models together, then that will give me a better approach. And I don't think that's quite happening today in Databricks. And also at this point, we're only focused on shallow machine learning. There's no optimizations here for deep learning yet, but it's just inevitable that stuff will probably come along at some point.
Yeah, I guess as a starting platform, super promising, like the way they're approaching it, and we'll see how it evolves.
Absolutely.
Cool, awesome. Okay, right, on to number 3, the final element, got Featurestore. So I think a lot of people, if they're not that familiar with data science, that kind of thing, we're asking, what's a feature? What's a feature store? How is this different from any other kind of transformed data? Do you want to give it like a little brief, this is what a feature is, and then why is Featurestore important? What does it mean?
Yeah, so Featurestore is definitely, it's a tricky term, right? In machine learning, we have different terms for a whole number of different things. So feature, you can generally think of a feature as being, right, an attribute in your data. It's a column in your data set. That's all we're kind of talking about when we talk about a feature. The difference here is that a feature might be something that's been inferred, and we might be generating it through another kind of machine learning process. And typically, when we're talking about a feature, we're not talking about a feature being necessarily the day of a week or maybe a piece of an item of equipment or something like this. But we're looking at its kind of vector encoding version of it. So we're not looking at any kind of categorical values like textual values, but we're looking to kind of convert that into a numerical value or some kind of vector representation of that feature. And so coming up with this feature engineering process, it can be quite complicated. You often hear people talk about 80% of machine learning, right, is fetching data, curating it, and doing feature engineering. So what a kind of feature store tries to do is to say, well, don't keep reinventing the same features every time. And we do this time and time again, right? We pull in a data set and then we do categorical encoding over it or string indexing, the same kind of thing if you're in Spark, where we take a value and turn it into a numerical representation. And we do that time and time again. And we might even look at a more complex structure as something which requires multiple columns to be represented as a single feature. And we might encode that as a vector. And then again, we might do that again and again. And when you start doing those things in repetition, you get better. But when you start out, it's difficult to know how to do those things and whether or not you're doing the right thing to get the best out of your model. So the whole kind of idea behind a feature store is to potentially have somebody more experienced build out some of those features for you, persist them long term, and then when you need to pull in the concept of a product, right? And that product is quite multidimensional, that you just pull that in from the feature store. And you're able to reference that in your model, and you're able to produce something much better by leaning on the experience of your peers. And that's part of the way that this is incredibly important. And also, if you look at how other vendors are stacking this up, quite ahead of a lot of other vendors in terms of implementing feature stores.
Okay, so it's a way of providing some building blocks that people can use to feed into their models to share common definitions and common ways of understanding the data, that kind of thing?
Yeah, pretty much. But it goes a little bit further in that one of the things that they're trying to do is to make it extensible for other processes. So one of the key problems that you have from kind of pivoting from building a batch machine learning model to building a real-time machine learning model is when you go through this process of feature engineering, whenever you're consuming new data, you need to apply the same steps to get it back into the shape that you want to use to then push that through your trained model. Now, if you've got a lot of features, and that's a lot of steps that need to be applied, you've got a really small window in which you can do that. Latency needs to be tiny, and latency is king in real-time machine learning. So one of the things that they're doing here is being able to expose those features via the feature store, that you can pull that back into your real-time model in super low latency so that you can consume from that. So if you've trained in batch, but then you're using your model in real time, then you can hopefully latch into those and keep that latency low. Now, not had a chance to test that out yet. I asked the questions, what is low latency? And I'm not too sure I got the right result back, but hopefully we'll see that. We'll try it out and we'll see how low that latency actually is.
Awesome. Sounds very, very cool. Very, very cool. When are we going to get our hands on it? When can we play with it?
Well, that's the thing, right? Most of this stuff is just there and live. I think the main caveat behind it is that you need to be running on the 8.3 ml beta version of the runtime. That's got all of this stuff baked in. But once you're there, you can start using the classification and the regression parts behind AutoML. There are some quirks already kind of coming out. So one of the things that we would typically look to do is, if I've got some data, that data might be exposed in Hive. It might not be exposed in Hive. I might just have some data that I've chucked into DBFS. That doesn't quite work. All your data at the moment appears that it has to be in Hive. So there's a couple of steps that you'll have to go through to get to that point that you can use it, but it's there and it's available, and it appears to be exactly the same for Featurestore as well. It's there and kind of, ready to go.
So it assumes you're plugged into the rest of the Databricks ecosystem. Yeah, I mean, kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, it's assuming, that's the general way, the way of working. I don't know. The two don't quite line up because there are difficulties with high concurrency clusters and other bits and pieces. But, we want to make sure, we kind of have to make sure that most things are exposed as Hive first. Yeah. And that does certainly help you if you're doing those things. But, hopefully we'll see that extended to not just be Hive, and I can pick any file from anywhere, because that's where we're going to see, some more benefits.
Cool. I mean, makes sense. It's the first sight we've got of it, and hopefully we will see it grow and extend and allow more things in. The one thing I did see that was quite promising is, like, from the very first demo of AutoML, they're showing that it does plug into the feature store. So if you've got some features that you've put in your store, you can actually say to AutoML, you probably want to use these things because we've already pre-engineered these. Makes sense. And it's good to see them actually coming up with that joined up approach for this stuff, rather than kind of two products that don't quite speak to each other.
Yeah, and exactly. And when we talk about, especially in Azure, right, the differences between Azure Machine Learning and Databricks, there's no feature store in Azure.
True. It's true. Alrighty, so that's the main roundup of all the things. Anything else that came up that would be good to talk about? Is that our main lot of interesting machine learning-y stuff?
I think that was, probably the main lot. There were also a number of improvements going into MLflow, particularly around auto-logging. And so auto-logging is a great way that you can basically say, hey, MLflow, when you're running experiments, just track what's happening and don't rely on me saying these are my values. The only problem with that is it's very inconsistent. It's largely driven by what you can get in an automated way outside of each one of these platforms. And when you consider XGBoost and sklearn and PyTorch and Keras, each of them have different ways of exposing this. So it's a little bit, you get some good stuff with others and not with another. But it looks like through using things like PyFunc, this is all kind of getting a bit better. And hopefully we should see some of these things becoming a bit more aligned. So loads of good stuff with MLflow too. And I think one of the interesting things that they had there is they were talking about that they are getting super close to going to the second major release now of MLflow as well. So I think they were asking for collecting feedback around, progressing to MLflow 2.0. So great stuff.
Which is it shows how long and how much it's matured over the years it's been out. It's cool.
Yeah, it's one of those that I still think is a new feature. And then when I look back to when we started using it, it's been a good couple of years now. So it's really matured, and I think it's really bedded in with the industry as well.
Okay, so final question before we wrap up. What do you make of koalas being donated into the Apache Spark Foundation? There is now actually a formal part of Spark and implemented as the pandas API formally?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, again, the sweet spot, right, for koalas and for pandas on top of Spark is to enable a data science audience to make the best use of Apache Spark and not just spin up a huge cluster, run everything in pandas, and only run it on the driver node, right? We want them to be working in a distributed way. I'm always in the opinion that if you want this stuff to scale and work the best way possible, it doesn't hurt you to learn a bit of PySpark or learn Scala and learn how to do this stuff in the best way, as opposed to using another abstraction framework. But maybe that's just me. And I think if you're in that like progression, then koalas now being, just a pandas API at least helps you on that road. I still think, learning a bit of PySpark is going to help you out better.
I mean, I'm a PySpark person. I'm happy in that world. I'm happy if everyone just learns PySpark, but I guess opening it up and making it as accessible to as many different people has always kind of been the Spark ethos, right? Bring your own language, R, Scala, PySpark. If it brings more people onto the system, and then we can start to standardize things, I guess it's a good approach.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Terry. Thank you for joining and enlightening on what's been going on.
You are most welcome. And hopefully I will find some time and we'll actually get a couple of videos on MLflow and on Featurestore, because both are great features and they're great things that we want to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you, Terry. So we'll quickly wrap up as usual. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for keeping in touch. We've had loads of questions coming about all the engineering side of things. So again, if there's anything you guys want to know about the data science side, about Featurestore, AutoML, what do you think about the pandas API, which used to be called koalas, which I think is no longer called koalas, because now it's the pandas API, just let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time with some, hopefully, more of a dig into some of this new stuff. Cheers.